Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Sister Sister, a podcast for spiritual baddies. We are your hosts, Elle and Maya, and Elle will tell us about today's episode.
Today, we are going to be doing a beginner's guide to spiritual alchemy. So, we're going to be breaking down what spiritual alchemy is, the different stages of it, as well as ways to incorporate it into your life. So, it's going to be kind of a lengthier episode, a lot of information being thrown at you. We did use a culmination of different sources for different parts of it. So, we're just going to have them all linked below. Just know that's where the information came from. If you want to read more, you can read more. For the sake of the length of the episode, we won't be saying where every single little bit of information came from, but all of the sources will be linked. So, what exactly is spiritual alchemy? We have a simple definition and then another one that has further explanation. So, the first definition is spiritual alchemy is a practice that utilizes the ancient occult practice of alchemy as a metaphor to facilitate inner transformation and spiritual awakening. So, our further explanation is whether you understand alchemy as a science or as a type of spiritual psychology, alchemy is ultimately concerned with transformation and change. While physical alchemy is concerned with altering and transforming the properties within matter, spiritual alchemy is concerned with freeing your spiritual self, which is obscured within you by the unrefined parts of your ego, your fears, shadows, personal beliefs, self loathing, etc. When it comes to physical alchemy versus spiritual alchemy is vastly more multifaceted. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of spiritual alchemy is its objective to free you from your core wounds, core beliefs, soul loss, and other self destructive personality structures to help you live freely and joyfully. Finding your pure essence, higher nature, or deeper soul is the ultimate state of transformation, the goal of spiritual alchemy. This is a process that attempts to restructure your personality and the various levels of attachment, avoidance, and identification that you possess. So, very much so about transforming who we are. This is very much so kind of a guide map to the idea of the spiritual journey. And this is more so just kind of like the very basis of it.
The materia prima, or first matter, is an alchemical symbol that reflects the notion that all the universe originated from a primitive, formless base. The idea of materia prima can be traced back to Aristotle, who understood that there's a force that holds all other forms in existence together, but it itself is invisible. These days we refer to it as spirit. Materia prima, as the invisible womb or unseen force, is a field of pure potential that can only come into existence when it is embodied within a form. In alchemy, the materia prima or primal material is that which of left over after we have reduced matter into its purest essence. This process is a powerful psychological symbol because it describes the internal experience of arriving at a core realization, or in other words, becoming aware of the root cause of a belief or what trauma within us. By working with the materia prima of our inner selves, we can go on a journey to find the philosopher's stone or spiritual liberation, which transforms any of our base qualities, such as selfishness, arrogance, and vanity, into gold, kindness, tolerance, and humility.
So, now we're going to talk about the four levels of alchemy. These do come from Latin words. So, just know that, like, the English version is very like simplified and it's not like the actual full concept of the Latin words. So the first level is going to be nigredo or the blackening, which is symbolic of death or old ways of being. Then we have number two, which is the albedo or whitening, symbolic of the process of spiritual illumination. The kitranitas or yellowing, symbolic of development of spiritual maturity. and then the rubedo or reddening, which is symbolic of the attainment of spiritual integration and liberation. So within the stages of spiritual alchemy, there's kind of those four levels that you can like go through, but there are seven stages, which we're now going to talk about what they are, as well as kind of an explanation of what occurs during this stage. So I'll go ahead and do the first stage and then we'll just switch back and forth. So stage one is the calcination, which calcination, the first stage of spiritual alchemy, is also known as the black stage. The color black represents chaos, that which is hidden and buried, and the material of the unconscious. It also refers to the materia prima, an idea in occult sciences that all matter in the universe emerged from an original primitive base. Calcination refers to the burning of the materia prima until it is transformed into ash. In a spiritual sense, it refers to breaking free from our worldly attachments, the desire for status and wealth, and the need to solidify our identity. It's not to say these things are wrong, but according to the process, the development of a higher level of consciousness and refinement of the spirit are hindered by these attachments. Calcination also refers to the burning off of all of the superfluous elements of ourselves that no longer serve us. We are purified by fire, and the hardened and dead parts of ourselves have burned away. All that has calcified within us is removed in a similar manner to how hardened plaque buildup on teeth can be removed. Our preconceived notions about our identity and our limiting core beliefs are put to the test in the calcination stage. Our ideologies and neurosis begin to lessen their grip on the persona, enabling the spiritual alchemist to stop self sabotaging behavior and take the first steps towards awakening. The calcination stage has been likened to the dark night of the soul. The 16th century poem describes the journey of the soul to unification with God, whereby our former worldview is dismantled and we undergo an existential crisis. The beginnings of spiritual development are typically arduous, as our former ties of identification are no longer valid and we come face to face with the void. We've talked about the dark night of the soul before on this podcast, and this is just kind of the spiritual alchemy version of it for stage one.
Stage two, which is known as dissolution, the second stage of the spiritual practice involves dissolving the ashes in water. Water can be interpreted as a symbol for the unconscious, which contains the hidden parts of ourselves that we have been afraid of and up until now have not been explored. Dissolution can be understood as the stage in which we free ourselves from inauthentic and acquired sense of identity. In medieval alchemy, dissolution can be understood as the stage in which we free ourselves from inauthentic and acquired sense of identity. In medieval alchemy, dissolution refers to the dissolving of solid material, such as salt dissolved in water. It can be understood in Jungian terms as the dissolution of the ego. Since the dissolution stage takes water as its symbol, it is also associated with intense emotions, as water often symbolizes the reservoir of emotions within. The dissolution stage involves the outlet of repressed emotions from traumatic events that we have pushed down in our psyche. It can be very cathartic step as we free ourselves from a painful past of experience, and self-doubt starts the process of emotional healing.
Then stage three is separation. In the separation stage, the pure essence is extracted from the rest of the mixture. As the first two stages were associated with fire and water, separation is related to the air element. In a spiritual sense, it can be understood as a separation from one's habitual thought processes or emotional trigger responses, allowing us to step back and distinguish our essence from our acquired personality. Separation is a very liberating stage where we can free ourselves of resentment towards ourselves and others. It is a kind of inner liberation from negative emotions by doing so. We can become aware of our true feelings. We separate ourselves from our inauthentic selves and step closer to our essential or higher self. The separation occurs when we no longer identify with the character we have been playing, but rather we become the awareness itself. We have conscious awareness of our own thoughts, feelings, and desires, but without identifying with them or becoming attached to them. The separation stage is a kind of detachment from our old skin. After the emptiness and suffering in the first stage of calcination, and then the fearful stage of dissolution, where hidden emotions emerge, the separation stage comes as a welcome relief as we experience the stillness of being separated from our inferior and authentic qualities.
Stage 4, conjunction. Conjunction refers to the process of combining the elements from the previous three stages. In a sense, we see what still remains within us, which is the value, and then begin to combine these elements to form one authentic spiritual self. After the first three stages of purification by fire, water, and air, our disparate elements are brought together by the earth element. We begin a process of embodiment as the spirit begins its process of materialization. We begin to feel unified in body and soul, but we are still drawing together different strands of our true self, and we are not yet finished. Polarities cease their conflict and come together, such as male and female, body and soul, spirit and matter. Harmony is achieved between the different elements of our being. The attributes typically associated with divine and feminine energy, such as intuition and emotion, unify with those attributes conventionally associated with the masculine, such as intellect and logic.
Stage 5, putrefaction or fermentation. Putrefaction or fermentation is the fifth stage and describes the decay of one's old self and the rebirth of one's true self. The first four stages involve discarding our old inauthentic self and drawing together the authentic elements within us. At this stage, however, we catch a glimpse of a more refined, authentic self. This stage can be likened to the rebirth of the phoenix from its own ashes. The process can be split into two: putrefaction and spiritualization. Putrefaction is the rotting away of our former selves as the superfluous is let go. Putrefaction can be a difficult stage and can involve strong feelings of depression or despair since we fear losing our identity, which is associated with our old self. Spiritualization, meanwhile, gives great relief as we begin to see the world in a new and luminescent way. It involves letting go of those parts of ourselves that no longer serve us in our present life, and as a result, this step can be accompanied by blissful feelings of inner peace and contentment.
Stage 6, distillation. The distillation stage is the stage when all of the impurities are removed. There is nothing left but the essence. In chemistry, distillation involves boiling and condensation to separate components and is commonly used in desalination. A liquid is boiled until it evaporates, and as the steam condenses, the essence is liberated from the matter. It marks the point at which our essence becomes spiritualized. In other words, in spiritual alchemy, distillation is a metaphor for the actualization of one's spirit. In Jungian terminology, this stage also involves the assimilation of any shadow aspects into our true selves. It is the distillation of one's true self and represents a step up in consciousness as our core identity is freed from any inferior elements. At this stage, the ego has ceased dominating behavior as we begin to hear the voice of our soul. It also marks the point at which the conscious and unconscious aspects of the self are brought into harmony.
And then finally, stage 7 is coagulation. The final stage on the spiritual journey is coagulation, which describes the process of solidification where one's essential self becomes whole. Coagulation refers to the process by which a liquid, typically blood, solidifies. It occurs when we are cut to form a scab. In spiritual alchemy, coagulation involves the solidification of our true self and can be likened to healing from a wound as we feel ourselves to be independent and complete. Coagulation involves the complete unification of polarities, spirit and matter, body and soul, masculine and feminine, to form a single whole. In this final stage, one's higher self emerges, and it can be likened to the point when gold cools and solidifies. So that is the stages of spiritual alchemy, but now you're probably wondering, how the heck do I actually put this into my everyday life? Like, how do I do all these things? How does this happen? Which we did already talk about the Dark Night of the Soul. I think that was last season? Question
I
mark? I don't
feel
know.
like that was like 2, 3 seasons ago.
Anyways, we've talked about it, I think, multiple times in different episodes, but go back and find that and
Yeah.
listen to it. But we are going to talk first about the laws of the universe that can be used throughout spiritual alchemy, as well as some other practical ways to bring alchemy into your everyday life, such as dressing and using alchemy as a symbol within your clothing and things like that, specifically jewelry, as those tend to be made of metal. So, first, using the laws of the universe. When talking about spiritual alchemy, we often see the laws of the universe brought up as spiritual alchemy is made on the basis of science that can't yet be explained fully. Here are some of the universal laws that come up more frequently to enhance your practice in spiritual alchemy. There are 12 universal laws, so we will be picking the ones that best work for spiritual alchemy and explaining how to use them. We will not discuss the law of attraction as we have a whole separate episode on the law of attraction. Technically, we have two episodes on the law of attraction. So go back and listen to those. But we're going to start with law number one, which is the law of divine oneness, which states that we are all interconnected through our creation by a creator. In other words, whatever spiritual being or cosmic order created me also created you using the same material. This law helps us in our practice of spiritual alchemy by recognizing if we are all made of the same material, then in turn, we can all make the changes necessary to create a higher way of thinking. This basically all goes back to the Big Bang Theory. Excuse me. There was nothing and then there was something, right? The Big Bang, and all matter was created from the Big Bang. And eventually, as everything cools over time that we quite literally can't even process as humans, it'll all eventually just dissipate and then it'll happen again on a continuous cycle. So, how do we use the law of oneness? Using the idea of interconnectedness, we can create ripple effects throughout our lives by focusing on how we feel and how we conduct ourselves in this life. In other words, to manifest things you want, you have to trigger the avalanche of positive outcomes. You can start the ripple effect by vibrating differently, changing your frequency. If you're a longtime follower of us, you're likely already doing this by, meditation. We talked about shadow work, trauma recovery, things like that. Anyways, become more compassionate towards yourself, all of those things, shadow work. So basically, what you're going to do is not overcomplicate it to create change where it's needed. You have to embrace what is working and set a positive intention. As Wayne Dyer says, do what feels good. Use the law of divine oneness to help you connect with others and also to create a better basis for yourself and to give yourself a little bit more grace where you need it because we all are just trying our best. You want to talk about the law of correspondence, Amaya?
Yep. So this law states that patterns repeat throughout the universe, and on a personal level, our reality is a mirror of what's happening inside us at that moment. Think as above, so below, as within, so without. And I'm sure you've heard this phrase before somewhere, some way, shape, or form. That's pretty much the law of correspondence. How to use it. In any troubling situation, ask what the situation can show you about yourself and what requires healing within. This can be done through journaling or the process of shadow work to confront the darker parts of yourself.
Then we have the law of inspired action, which is closely related to the law of attraction. The law of inspired action is all about taking those real actionable steps to invite what we want into our lives. Often the inspiration comes from within. Inspired action is that gentle internal nudge. Kumar says it's not always a plan of action. So this kind of goes back to how we've talked in our manifesting episodes of manifesting's great, but if you don't put in the work, it's never going to happen. How to use it, practicing this law is all about slowing down, getting quiet, and creating space for internal guidance. When we let go of our need to arrange and control how things will work out and are instead open to all possibilities, it makes room for new ways of achieving the goals that we might not have considered otherwise. This law helps us to open ourselves up and allow real change to occur, which is very important throughout spiritual alchemy. You have to be open to change, even if it's not going to happen in the controlled sense that you were preparing yourself for. Because that's kind of the whole point of an ego death is it's not going to be change that you were prepared for.
Next is the law of relativity. This law suggests that we are inclined to compare things in our world, but in reality, everything is neutral. Relativism exists in all things, and in the end, meaning comes down to our perspective and perception. How to use it. Applying this law can help us understand the tougher parts of our lives within greater compare. Applying this law can help us understand the tougher parts of our lives with greater compassion. For example, if we're feeling ungrateful for our living situation, it could be because we're comparing our arrangements with someone else's. Instead, we'd be better off appreciating what we have without needing to compare it to something else. As we go through the process of change in spiritual alchemy, this law can aid us in our detriment of comparison. Many say the largest killer of happiness is comparing to others. This law allows us to focus on what we can do to change rather than basing off goals or what others have.
Yeah, so that also kind of goes to the idea of disconnecting from that material need, that material want, letting your ego go. So now we're going to be talking about incorporating alchemy into your wardrobe. So we're going to be talking about gold, copper, and silver. And I'm just going to go ahead and go through these and then you can do the next point, Amaya. So gold, the celestial body represented by gold is the sun. This metal was highly valued by the ancient Egyptians, Irish, Romans, Asians, Africans, and Central Americans. It's quite literally everywhere. Gold has one of the highest values money wise of any precious metal. It was believed to represent perfection and purity. Gold was often used as offerings for the gods for ceremonial purposes. Around the world, gold has been seen as a symbol of wealth, prosperity, authority, and charm. It can aid in healing, protection, growth, and knowledge. You also are trying to become the gold in spiritual alchemy, so that's a great way to incorporate it to kind of keep it close to you, help you get further on. Then copper is ruled by the planet Venus. It is one of the oldest metals known to humanity and has been held sacred in different cultures, including Native Americans, Asian, Europe, South America, and Middle Eastern countries. Copper embodies the nurturing aspect of women and their divine feminine energy. It is associated with love and lust and symbolizes charisma, beauty, artistic creativity, affection, kindness, and balance. So if you struggle with connecting to your divine feminine and finding that balance throughout your journey, copper might be a good one to incorporate. And then finally, silver is connected to the moon. It is one of the most ancient and versatile metals. It is associated with philosophical traits of intuition, self reflection, and inner wisdom. It is a feminine metal, a symbol of purity, and it is connected to the divine goddesses and feminine spirits. It is a powerful healing energies include protection, emotional healing, love, and healing of the heart, ancient wisdom, lucid dreams, luck, and wealth. It is also powerful for aiding in clarity, awareness, focus, persistent, internal knowledge, and strength. So silver might be a very good one whenever you're kind of going through the first couple stages in your spiritual alchemy journey to keep on you. I personally am a silver jewelry girly. I don't know about most people, but I prefer silver. So it's definitely going to help you through those like emotional, I guess, kind of wheels that you're spinning through to be able to get to the other side of the journey.
I too am a silver girly. But I have some items with gold as well, but not my personal favorite. Anyway, practicing awareness and reflection. First is symbolic interpretation. One can interpret challenges symbolically, identifying parallels between experiences and alchemical processes. Journaling. Keeping an alchemical journal to record daily reflections, emotional, and personal insights. This practice enhances self awareness and facilitates the recognition of patterns. Individuals can take special note of when bad things or challenges become fertile ground for new and exciting endeavors. Notice when negative emotions into insights or motivation. Mindful observation. Engage in mindful observation. By observing thoughts and emotions without judgment, individuals can gain clarity on their internal processes and initiate transformative change. Transformation. Notice when physical transformation occurs in your world. Engage in creative products where you can witness something being reborn, refurbished, or elevated. Notice also when triggers or reactions within yourself become more favorable, tolerable, or positive.
And then we have the practice of the art of healing. So you can do this through emotional healing, physical healing, and spiritual healing. For emotional healing, sharing stories is a profound way to engage and witness the ways in which individuals have embraced emotional alchemy, have transcended trauma, and transformed pain into resilience and compassion. A great way to do emotional healing is to go to therapy. I hate to be the person to break it to you, but I personally believe a lot people would be a lot better off if they went and talked about it. So let's try and go and talk about it if you have access to mental health care. I think that that's a very big portion if you are going through a spiritual alchemy journey or a spiritual journey at all. Shadow work can be a lot if you've been through traumatic events. Go see a therapist, please. Then we have physical healing, bearing witness to individuals undergoing physical alchemy, whether through lifestyle changes or alternative therapies, have experienced healing and renewed vitality, can be inspirational and motivate us to engage in our own transformations. This can be things like eating better. This can be like starting to go to the gym. This could be having an aromatherapy practice to help whenever you get headaches or whatever, using herbs to help you when you're sick, that kind of thing, being a little bit more mindful of the things that you're putting in your body and how you're treating your body. And then spiritual healing, explore narratives of spiritual alchemy leading to a profound sense of purpose, connection, and inner peace. Talk to people within your spiritual community. That's really one of the biggest things. Find your connections and figure out how this journey can heal you and the ways that you need to heal to move forward. So now we're going to kind of give our final thoughts before we go into tarot time and the astrology almanac. I think first and foremost, spiritual alchemy at its core is self-awareness to inspire change. It's the basis of a spiritual journey, whether you recognized it as spiritual alchemy or not from the beginning. We talk about a lot of things like the dark night of the soul, transformation, becoming your higher self, advancing your consciousness. In that, though, I also feel like there's never truly a full ascension to your highest self. I feel like we can always change and develop and grow as we go through life and have new experiences. And I also don't think that there's like anything wrong with if you backpedal some because something else traumatic happened in your life. There's a lot of ways to heal yourself, and there also, I think, should be a moment of acknowledgement for at some point within your healing journey, and I tell this to everyone, and Amaya probably knows what I'm going to say. At some point in your healing journey, you are going to feel stuck because you have done all of the work to focus on the different parts of yourself that need healed, except for the part that doesn't like being focused on and picked apart like that. And you don't know how to heal it because, in order to heal it through all of your other healing methods, you have to pick that part of yourself apart. But that part of yourself won't let you do that. And then you're stuck. So, for that, I do say that at that point, that might be when you should go to therapy. Um, once again, great tool. But in all seriousness, I think that that is something that we have to confront a lot with our ego. And that's a big part of spiritual alchemy is that you have to become self-aware, but sometimes we become so self-aware that it then becomes an issue within our own healing journey. I am painfully self-aware. Like I know why I do the things that I do and I know what the consequences are going to be, but sometimes I still do them. Like we can be painfully self-aware. Spiritual alchemy is also meant to be a personal practice. That's, it's meant to be personal. And did you want to add something, Amaya?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like self-awareness and personal practice, it's you're always gonna go through it. You're always gonna be hiring to the next level, so to speak. I think that in your lifetime, you're always gonna grow, you're always gonna change. And even if you don't think you are, you probably are. Things that you used to let slide, for example, you probably won't tolerate anymore. You won't allow others to tolerate it because it's something that you overcome and you're maybe you're what's the word I'm looking for? Like in this lifetime you're meant to show others how to do that thing or how to overcome that yourself as a generational curse that you're breaking. So I feel like yes, spiritual alchemy is pretty much to inspire change, but I think as humans and as like this species, so to speak, I feel like we're always gonna learn how to be better, like the best version of ourselves, and we're gonna keep leveling up. And I also think like it's okay to be self-aware because when you're not self-aware, you don't realize how much personally how you can be self-harming yourself, how you might be harming others, you're just not aware of the things that are like problems in your life. And if you choose not to be self-aware, then I mean are you
That's a
even
whole
trying
other
to
TED
grow?
talk.
Yeah. Like, are you gonna try and grow? Are you gonna try and be better as a person? I think that overall, the idea here is that you're gonna continue to go through this in your lifetime. You might overcome traumas from a kid, when you were a kid, as an adult, but in your adult world, you're also gonna go through traumatic experiences. Like, it's just a way of life. Like, every person experiences some kind of traumatic event or multiple, which is sad, in our lifetime.
Yeah, and I think that one thing that we have to like acknowledge too is that the only constant in life is change. That is the only constant in life is change, which is like kind of contradictory to say, but it's the truth. And yeah, I think self-awareness is very valuable. However, I feel like people should also realize that like it's okay to need help to get past that point where like you are so self-aware that like you overthink everything you do. That's like that's on having anxiety disorders. Yeah, but
Both of
kind of
us.
yeah. The final like point I kind of wanted to bring in, and then you can add to it if you'd like, Amaya, is that spiritual alchemy can really aid in accountability as well as be a guide to healing. I think that's why so many people probably find it so valuable because one of the biggest things in a spiritual journey is you have to be able to take accountability for your actions and how they impact you, those around you, and even people that you may not like realize they impact. And that's a hard thing to come to terms with, right? Because a lot of people did not grow up in a place where the adults around them took accountability. And that's a very big, like, wound from childhood that can create a lot of different types of insecure attachment styles that then will affect you for the rest of your life if you can't take accountability for others' actions and how it impacted you into shaping who you are. And that isn't a sentence to be like that forever, but that's where you have to go on the healing journey. And I think that's why spiritual alchemy is a great thing to know about because it kind of gives you that breakdown of a guide of like, okay, these are the steps Now apply it to your situation and go through them to be able to make effective change and heal the parts of you that you need to heal.
I agree. Honestly, like a lot of the things that we experience isn't always our fault, but I don't think we should let it become us because you're only going to hurt yourself and others in the progress, even if you don't intend to. So I think that growth is important, finding ways to help yourself let go, be better, of prevent like more like it can, I'm not saying it will, but it can prevent further experiences from happening. But I feel like when you don't address those traumas, it's gonna happen over and over and over and over, and it's gonna happen over it again in every lifetime that I believe. And we've talked about our souls like being the same in every life, but and we're learning the same lesson over and over again until we break the curse or learn the lesson and don't do it anymore, whatever it is that it may be. So I think it's really important that we just like learn it, live it, learn it, and move on from it, and also like just try to be our best selves because I feel like when we have all this baggage holding us back, truthfully, it's just not good for anybody.
Well, and that's why, like, I always say whenever people come in and they talk to me, because owning a witch shop, I do get a lot of people that come in here on what is probably one of the worst days of their life, or they're going through a really hard time and they're turning to spirituality to try and heal themselves, right? Like, that's one of the biggest things. I get people who have gone through all kinds of forms of abuse and trauma and just traumatic things occurring around them, even if they weren't directly impacted by them. And I think that something that we have to like recognize with this is the fact that traumatic things happen and it's horrible. Like, no one wishes that upon anyone else. At least no good people do. I think you don't ever have that kind of ill intent towards someone for something absolutely awful to happen. But at the end of the day, how you handle that trauma is fully on you. You are fully responsible for how you handle it and how you emotionally process it. And if you choose to become a terrible person, that is your karma to bear, which is also like a hard thing to say to people because it's like, well, you can say like this horrible thing happened to me and that's why I am the way that I am, but it's like at the end of the day, are you trying to be better? You know, progress and change do take time, but if you aren't doing anything to try and effectively make that change, then you're just going to repeat the cycle. So, let's get
Agreed.
into tarot time. All right, let's see, Spirit. What does the collective need to know today on this lovely, lovely day of this episode? I'm taking the first one that came out, not the other 15 that fell on the floor. So, the first one that came out was the Queen of Discs, which is a much better card than the one that we got last week. This is about being in your stable feminine energy, getting your bag, knowing what you want, focusing on a stable future, feeling very calm, connected to nature. This, Pentacles discs is represented by earth signs. This also could represent a divine feminine in your life that helps give you stability. Maybe this is someone who is helping you heal emotionally. You may have someone like that coming into your life, or you could be coming into this energy where you are very stable, you got your bag, you know what you're doing, your career's going well, etc., etc., etc. Good looks.
Let's get right into astrology almanac.
Today, the sun enters Sagittarius. Usually, Sagittarius season is marked by new opportunities, exploration, and adventure. However, with Mercury still in retrograde, you may want to hold off on those plans until next month. Then on the 27th, Saturn will go direct in Pisces. This can help to lift some stifling energy that has been ruminating over the last few months. You can get more comfortable in your subconscious mind and allow yourself to push through the karmic cycles into the next stage of life.
At least Mercury retrograde is over. Yeah, that's today's episode. No, I'm kidding. Thank you guys for tuning into another episode of Sister Sister, a podcast for spiritual baddies. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. And if you are new here, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Instagram and TikTok, and see you next week.